Global economy, beyond the Ukrainian crisis. Ukraine on Fire is a documentary film, directed by Igor Lopatonok, which featured Oliver Stone, the executive producer, interviewing some prominent political figures in the region. Despite the scary title, Ukraine was not on fire when the documentary was aired in 2017. However, since 24th of February 2022, Ukraine is actually on fire. Will this conflict really have a winner? Will this be a watershed moment in the world's economic and political systems? Or, similar to all the prior conflicts, would this one also benefit a select few, while creating widespread destruction? Even before the Ukraine crisis, the world economy was heading for a perfect storm as Europe, China, and the United States were all experiencing downturns simultaneously. So the Ukraine crisis is the last nail of the global economy? Let's have a look. How will this impact Europe? Due to their proximity to the area, and their extensive economic ties to both Russia and Ukraine, the European Union will suffer heavily from the crisis. The conflict has significantly hampered Europe's promising, but unfinished recovery from the pandemic. The crisis has escalated inflation, which was already increasing throughout the year 2021. Russia accounts for 25% of the EU's oil, and 45% of its natural gas imports. Moreover, 44% of Europe's hard coal requirements are coming from Russia. Following the conflict in Ukraine, the US, Canada, and the UK declared embargoes for Russian energy. But the EU opted to wait, and instead announced a new energy strategy. As per the EU's new strategy, nearly two-thirds of Russian gas imports will be cut off by the end of 2022. And before 2030, Europe will completely eliminate it. However, this strategy runs the risk of increasing energy prices even more. In reality, replacing Russian energy is more of a challenge for Europe. Even in the most optimistic case, where current storage facilities are 90% full at the height of the winter, as many as 14 of the EU's 27 member states will have reserves for less than 30 days. Each day, the Europe imports around 3 million barrels of oil from Russia. This might be replaced by fuel from the US or Iran, as well as by restructuring supply chains from Canada, Norway, the UK, and Denmark. But the question is, even if they are successful in obtaining their energy needs from the above sources, how much of a premium will they have to pay? On the other hand, Russia is not only oil and gas. Russia is the world's largest wheat exporter. In addition, it is also one of the largest exporters of sunflower oil and barley. Further, Russia is the biggest exporter of fertilizers in the world, responsible for 23% of ammonia exports, 14% of urea, 10% of processed phosphate, and 21% of potash exports. Sanctioning Russian products will make the livelihood of European farmers more difficult. So, cutting Russia out of the equation will bring more questions than the answers. This could be the reason why major European economies, including France, Germany, Italy, and the United Kingdom, have forecasted near zero, or negative growth rates for year 2022. So, things are not looking great for Europe. Ukrainian crisis, and the US. After a period of fiscal expansion and monetary accommodation, US inflation was already at historically high levels. However, the Ukrainian crisis gave US policymakers an opportunity to hide their economic mismanagement. An increase in oil prices would primarily have an impact on household wealth and consumer expenditure in the US. Because of its limited trade relationships with Ukraine and Russia, the United States is expected to see less severe short-term economic impacts, comparing to Europe. Unlike its European counterparts, the US can increase domestic energy production, and to some extent, agricultural output also, to partly offset the impact. However, due to supply chain bottlenecks, shortages, and various regulatory, financial, and technological barriers, US producers are not completely free to increase the production. What this crisis brings to Asia. Asian economies have been seriously weakened by the COVID-19 pandemic, and they will continue to be affected by the economic downturn in Europe and the US. The Ukrainian conflict will have significant impacts on Asian economies. The biggest problem, however, will be the rising energy costs. Due to the recurrence of the epidemic and the tight zero-COVID policy, China will experience an economic setback in the year 2022. The burden on the food supply systems would also have a greater impact on Asian countries. At least 50 nations rely on Russia and Ukraine for 30% or more of their wheat supply, with economies in Asia and Northern Africa being among the most dependent. What this crisis means for Africa. Many African nations have large external debts, so they are not in a position to afford rising oil and gas prices. Sub-Saharan African nations import a lot of energy and food items, especially wheat from Russia and Ukraine. Any increase in food prices or disruptions in the supply will be disastrous for Africa. With prolonged droughts in East Africa, the continent, which is seeing a rapid demographic increase, is already the most impacted by climate change. Therefore, Sub-Saharan Africa presents the greatest concerns for food security. How does this crisis affect Latin America? Rising food and energy costs have a long history of fueling political and public unrest in South America. Therefore, rising inflation across the continent will present challenges for the region's governments. During the pandemic, many governments had increased their public spending. As a result, they currently have very limited fiscal space to support food and energy subsidies. Latin America may experience some benefits from increased commodity prices, but the difficult overall environment is sufficient to offset any benefit. For instance, higher oil prices have historically benefited Venezuela's economy. But, Due to nations' deteriorating energy infrastructure, it would take years to reap the benefits of the higher energy prices. The world's wheat shortfall could be somewhat offset by South America's agricultural powerhouse. But there are several problems that make that scenario implausible. For instance, while projecting an 11% increase in wheat production this year, Brazil will still need to import wheat to meet domestic demand. Further, the war has increased the price of fertilizers. Shortages in fertilizers will have a negative impact on the region's upcoming harvests. Even if major fertilizer importers like Brazil have continued to purchase the product from Russia, this reduction may still happen. So what about Russia? Russia is also under pressure due to sanctions. They lost their largest energy market. Their reserves, worth around $300 billion, have also been confiscated. As a result of Russia's exclusion from the SWIFT system, it is challenging for Russian banks to receive payments for their exports. But Russia has one advantage over them. They possess commodities and the rest of the world needs them. On the other hand, two thirsty nations, India and China, have expressed an interest in buying more Russian oil. These two markets alone makes up for the market share Russia lost in Europe. Despite a decline in export volumes, Russia has made €93 billion from the export of fossil fuels in the first 100 days of the crisis. As a result, the Russian currency has rebounded strongly following its initial decline. Russia's pre-war budget was balanced at an oil price of $44 per barrel. At the current market prices, Russia will post substantial trade surpluses even after they provide attractive discounts for their big buyers. The crisis has caused an increase in energy prices, which benefits Russia. The longer the crisis lasts, the more money Russia will make. Let's summarize the implications of this crisis for the rest of the world. High energy prices and shortages of essential foods will raise tensions in Asia. In the upcoming months, we may see more protests in Asian cities. The Ukrainian crisis will be a double-edged sword for Africa. Increased energy costs will put pressure on their economies, and disruptions in the supply of essential commodities, like wheat, would put the sub-Saharan countries in danger. Rising energy and food prices will put Latin America, the Caribbean, and even some of the Middle Eastern countries under pressure, both economically and politically. On the other hand, Ukraine will get destroyed in the process. The likelihood that they will lose a sizable amount of their territory is also high. The Ukrainian economy, infrastructure, and most importantly the lives of brave Ukrainians, will be shattered. Meanwhile, Europe will bear the brunt of this crisis' far-reaching consequences. First, the situation brings an influx of refugees into the European Union, which might evolve into a humanitarian crisis. Moreover, sanctions on Russian energy and food will push Europe's inflation further. If Russia shuts down its gas pipes, the coming winter is going to be the darkest winter in Europe for decades. Additionally, the crisis has heightened security concerns among Europeans. As a result, European countries will increase their military budget. Although, this will be a good news for the US military-industrial complex. High military expenses will put more pressure on already strained European economies. Furthermore, giving over the crucial Russian market to their rivals, will create more challenges for the European businesses in the long run. Inflationary pressures, slowing economic development, and high unemployment will make re-election difficult for the vast majority of European leaders. This might lead to political instability across Europe. The crisis will increase natural gas shipments from the United States to Europe. This has provided the US with a new market for its gas. In effect, Europe will become more and more dependent on the US for its energy and security. The Ukrainian conflict, therefore, serves the geopolitical and economic interests of the US. In a nutshell, the Ukrainian crisis will make the oil-exporting nations, including Russia, much wealthier, the US, stronger, Latin America, Asia, and Africa more vulnerable, and Europe, more dependent, weak, and fragile. Thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing, liking, and sharing, which means a lot to me. I love to see your thoughts in the comment section.